The morphine was wearing off, and grandmother's eyes were clearer than they'd been in weeks. Her skeletal fingers gripped my wrist with surprising strength as I leaned closer to her hospital bed. The steady beep of machines filled the sterile air between us. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. "That's not your real sister," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum of medical equipment. I froze, searching her face for signs of the confusion that had plagued her recent days. But her gaze was sharp, focused, cutting through me with the clarity I remembered from my childhood when she'd catch me in a lie about broken vases or missing cookies. "Grandma, what are you talking about?" I asked, glancing toward the door where my sister Emma sat in the hallway, scrolling through her phone while we waited for the inevitable. "Claire," grandmother's grip tightened, her voice gaining urgency. "Listen to me. I don't have much time left, and there are things you need to know. Things I promised your mother I'd never tell." My heart began racing. Emma and I had been inseparable for 26 years. We shared the same dark hair, the same stubborn chin, the same laugh that could fill a room. Everyone said we looked like twins, despite the 2-year age gap. The idea that we weren't sisters was absurd. "You're confused," I said gently, trying to extract my wrist from her grip. "The medication is making you say things that don't make sense." "The blue box?" she insisted, her eyes burning with intensity. "In my closet, behind the winter coats. Everything you need to know is in there. But Claire..." She paused, her breathing labored. "Be careful who you trust. Some secrets were buried for good reasons." Before I could respond, Emma appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. "Is everything okay?" I heard voices. Grandmother's grip loosened immediately, and her eyes took on that distant, medicated haze that had become familiar over the past month. "Oh, Emma dear. I was just telling Claire about the roses in my garden. Such beautiful roses." Emma smiled sadly, approaching the bed. "The nurses say she's been talking about her garden a lot lately, living in the past." I studied grandmother's face, but she was already drifting back into that morphine-induced fog. Had she really said what I thought she'd said? Or was I the one losing my mind? The funeral was held 3 days later on a crisp October morning that reminded me of grandmother's stories about autumn in her childhood. Emma stood beside me at the graveside, her hand finding mine as the pastor spoke about eternal rest and divine mercy. We were the only family left now, or so I'd always believed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After the service, we returned to grandmother's house to begin the difficult task of sorting through 78 years of accumulated memories. The Victorian home felt eerily quiet without her presence, shadows stretching across rooms that had once been filled with her laughter and stories. "I'll start with the kitchen," Emma said, tying her dark hair back into a ponytail. "You know how she kept everything, probably have recipes dating back to the Civil War." I nodded absently, my thoughts returning to those whispered words in the hospital. "I'll take her bedroom. Might as well start with the hardest part." Emma squeezed my shoulder. "We'll get through this together. We always do." As she headed toward the kitchen, I climbed the creaking stairs to grandmother's bedroom. The space felt frozen in time, her reading glasses still folded on the nightstand beside a half-finished crossword puzzle. Her closet stood slightly ajar, winter coats hanging like silent sentinels in the darkness beyond. I approached the closet slowly, my hands trembling as I pushed aside the heavy wool coats. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Old shoes, storage boxes filled with seasonal decorations, a vacuum cleaner that hadn't worked in years. But then, wedged behind a 1960s fur coat, I spotted a corner of faded blue cardboard. The box was heavier than I expected, about the size of a shoebox but deeper. My name was written across the top in grandmother's precise handwriting, "For Claire, when I'm gone." My heart hammered against my ribs as I lifted the lid. Inside were documents, official-looking papers, birth certificates, and medical records. But it was the photograph that made me gasp and nearly drop the box. It showed my mother, young and radiant, holding a baby that was unmistakably me. But standing beside her was a woman I'd never seen before, cradling another infant. The woman had Emma's distinctive green eyes and sharp cheekbones. Written on the back in faded ink, Claire, 6 months, Emma, 4 months, 1997. My legs gave out, and I sank onto grandmother's bed, staring at the impossible image. Emma and I weren't born 2 years apart as I'd always believed. We were born 2 months apart, to different mothers. With shaking hands, I reached for the birth certificates. Mine showed what I expected: mother's name, the local hospital, October 15th, 1997. But the second certificate made my blood run cold. Emma's birth date was listed as August 15th, 1997, and under mother's name was the woman from the photograph, Sarah Michelle Harrison. I rifled through more papers, finding adoption documents, medical records, and legal agreements I couldn't fully comprehend. But one letter, written in grandmother's handwriting and dated just 6 months ago, made everything devastatingly clear. "My dearest Claire," it began. "If you're reading this, then I've failed to take these secrets to my grave as I promised your mother I would. But watching you and Emma grow up together, seeing how much you love each other, I've come to believe that some truths are more important than old promises. Your mother couldn't have children after you were born. Complications during delivery damaged her reproductive system beyond repair. She was heartbroken, desperate for you to have a sibling, someone to share your life with. When Sarah Harrison, a young woman in our church, found herself pregnant and unmarried, your mother saw an opportunity. The adoption was arranged privately. Sarah was struggling financially, and your parents offered her a way to ensure her child would have a good life. But Sarah didn't just want financial security. She wanted to be part of Emma's life. So we arranged something unprecedented, an open adoption disguised as a family friendship. Sarah became Aunt Sarah, who visited regularly, who took Emma on special outings, who always remembered her birthday with thoughtful gifts. You and Emma were raised as sisters, but Sarah never stopped being Emma's mother. She just couldn't claim that title publicly. The deception worked so well that eventually, I think even your parents began to forget the truth. But Sarah never did, and neither did I. I'm telling you this now because Sarah is sick, very sick. She's been battling cancer for the past year, and she wants to tell Emma the truth before she dies. But she's afraid of destroying the family dynamic that has worked so beautifully for over 20 years. Use your judgment, Claire. You've always been the thoughtful one, the one who considers consequences before acting. But remember, Emma has a right to know where she comes from, and Sarah has a right to acknowledge her daughter before it's too late. The choice is yours now. I pray you choose wisely. All my love. Grandmother. I sat in stunned silence, the letter fluttering to the floor as my hands went numb. Aunt Sarah. Sweet, quirky Aunt Sarah who always brought Emma elaborate birthday cakes and took her to museums and art galleries. Who had Emma's same laugh, her same way of tilting her head when she was thinking. How had we never seen it? Claire? Emma's voice drifted up from downstairs. I found a box of old photo albums. Want to look through them together? I scrambled to collect the papers, my mind racing. Emma was downstairs, innocent and trusting, believing her entire life story was true. Meanwhile, I held in my hands the evidence that everything we'd believed about our family was a carefully constructed lie. Be right there, I called back, my voice somehow steady despite the chaos in my head. I stared at the box of secrets. then at the bedroom door, then back at the box. In the space of 20 minutes, my entire world had shifted on its axis. Emma wasn't my sister. Not biologically, anyway. She had a living mother who had been hiding in plain sight our entire lives. And I was now the keeper of a secret that could either destroy our family or complete it. The photograph of our mothers holding us as babies seemed to mock me from the bed. Two women, united in their love for their children but separated by circumstances and secrets. My mother, desperate for another child to love. Sarah, young and frightened but determined to stay connected to her daughter. And caught in the middle, two little girls who had grown up believing they shared everything, including their blood. I could hear Emma's footsteps on the stairs now, coming to find me. In seconds, she would walk into this room with her trusting smile, ready to share in the bittersweet task of sorting through our grandmother's memories. She had no idea that everything she thought she knew about herself was about to change, unless I decided it shouldn't. The box felt impossibly heavy in my lap. Inside it lay the power to shatter Emma's world, or to give her something she'd never known she was missing, the truth about where she came from, and the knowledge that she had been loved not by two parents but by four. Claire, are you okay up there? I quickly shoved the box back behind the winter coats and stood up, smoothing my clothes and trying to compose my face into something resembling normal. Coming! But as I headed toward the door, my reflection caught in grandmother's vanity mirror. I looked exactly like I always had. Dark hair, brown eyes, sharp chin. But now I knew that while Emma and I had grown up as mirrors of each other in every way that mattered, we were strangers by blood. The question that would haunt me for the days to come was simple. What do you do when you discover that your entire life has been built on the most beautiful lie ever told? Emma appeared in the doorway, photo album tucked under her arm, her face bright with the kind of innocence I was no longer sure I could protect. Ready to take a trip down memory lane? I managed a smile, the weight of grandmother's secrets pressing against my chest like a physical force. Always. Lead the way. But as I followed Emma back downstairs, leaving the blue box hidden in the darkness of the closet, I knew that our trip down memory lane was about to become a journey into uncharted territory. Because now I had to decide, was the truth worth the risk of losing the sister who had been the most important person in my life for 26 years? The photographs Emma had found were spread across grandmother's dining room table when I joined her, chronicling decades of family history. She was bent over a particularly old album, her finger tracing the edge of a black and white wedding photo. "Look at this," she said, glancing up with a smile. "Mom and Dad's wedding. Don't they look impossibly young?" I studied the image of our parents, my parents, frozen in sepia-toned happiness. Dad in his rented tuxedo, Mom in her simple white dress, both of them beaming at the camera with the confidence of people who believed their love could conquer anything. They had no idea then about the struggles that lay ahead, the heartbreak of infertility, the complicated web of love and deception they would weave to create the family they desperately wanted. "Mom was beautiful," I said softly, settling into the chair beside Emma. "I wish we had more time with them." Emma nodded, turning the page to reveal baby photos, dozens of them chronicling our early years with the devotion of parents who had waited a long time for children to photograph. But now, I found myself analyzing each image with new eyes, looking for clues I had missed before. There I was at 6 months old, chubby and grinning, surrounded by presents at what appeared to be a lavish birthday party. And there was Emma at what I now knew was 4 months old, being held by a woman whose face was always carefully positioned outside the camera's range. Aunt Sarah, I realized, present at every celebration, but never quite stepping into the frame as anything more than a helpful family friend. "Remember when Aunt Sarah used to take us to the Children's Museum every summer?" Emma asked, pointing to a photo of us building blocks in what looked like an interactive exhibit. She was so patient. With us. Never seemed to mind when we ran around like wild animals. My throat tightened. She loved spending time with you, I said, the words carrying new weight now that I understood the truth behind them. With both of us, I mean. Emma smiled, lost in the memory. I always felt like she understood me in a way that was different. From Mom and Dad. Like we were on the same wavelength somehow. Of course they were. They shared DNA, shared personality quirks, shared an invisible connection that I had always attributed to Emma's natural charisma. But it hadn't been charisma at all. It had been the pull of blood calling to blood, mother recognizing daughter even when neither could acknowledge the truth. When was the last time you saw her? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Emma frowned, thinking. It's been a while, actually. Maybe 6 months. She seemed tired when she visited last, said she was dealing with some health issues. She looked up suddenly, her eyes bright with concern. We should call her. Let her know about grandmother's passing. She and Grandma were close. My chest tightened with the knowledge that Sarah's health issues were far more serious than Emma realized. According to grandmother's letter, Sarah was dying. Fighting cancer and running out of time to reveal the truth to the daughter she had loved from a distance for 26 years. That's a good idea, I managed. Do you have her number? Of course. It's programmed into my phone as Aunt Sarah with about 15 heart emojis. Emma laughed, but there was something wistful in her expression. I know it's silly, but I've always felt closer to her than to our other relatives. Like she really got me, you know? I nodded, my heart breaking for both of them. For Emma, who had been unknowingly yearning for her biological mother her entire life, and for Sarah, who had been forced to love her daughter from the shadows, pretending to be something less than she was. As Emma continued flipping through the photos, chattering about memories and shared experiences, I found myself studying her with new eyes. The way she gestured with her hands when she spoke. Had I seen Sarah do the same thing? The particular way she laughed at her own jokes, was that inherited rather than learned? How many pieces of evidence had been hiding in plain sight, dismissed as coincidence or admired as Emma's unique personality? Claire? Emma's voice cut through my thoughts. You seem distracted. Are you okay? I looked up to find her watching me with concern, her green eyes, Sarah's eyes I now realized, searching my face for signs of distress. This was Emma at her core, always tuned in to other people's emotions, always ready to offer comfort or support. It was one of the things I loved most about her, this intuitive empathy that made her such an incredible sister and friend. But now I wondered, was this sensitivity something she had learned from our parents' loving example, or was it inherited? From the mother who had been forced to love her from a careful distance. Just tired, I lied, forcing a smile. It's been a long few days. Emma reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I know, but we're handling it well, don't you think? Grandma would be proud of how we're taking care of everything. The gesture, so simple and familiar, brought tears to my eyes. Emma had been my anchor through every crisis, every celebration, every ordinary day of our shared life. She was the first person I called with good news, the shoulder I cried on during breakups, the voice of reason when I was being irrational. The idea that I might lose that connection, that the truth might somehow damage the bond we'd spent 26 years building, terrified me more than I cared to admit. But as I looked at her sitting there, surrounded by photographs that told only part of her story, I also felt a deep sadness for what she didn't know about herself. Somewhere out there, Sarah was fighting for her life, carrying the weight of a secret that had defined her existence for over 2 decades. She deserved the chance to acknowledge her daughter before it was too late. And Emma deserved the chance to know the woman who had given her life, and then spent years loving her from the margins. Emma, I began, then stopped. How do you tell someone that everything they believe about their identity is wrong? How do you explain that the family friend they've always adored is actually their biological mother? How do you reveal that their entire life has been built on a foundation of beautiful, well-intentioned deception? What is it? Emma asked, tilting her head in that familiar way. I stared into her trusting face, seeing Sarah's features overlaid like a double exposure. The truth sat in my throat like a stone, demanding to be spoken. But the weight of consequences held me back. Once these words were said, they couldn't be taken back. Once this secret was revealed, our family would never be the same. I think we should call Aunt Sarah tomorrow, I said finally, taking the coward's path but buying myself time to think. Let her know about the services she missed. Emma's face brightened. She'll be so sorry she wasn't here. She loved grandmother almost as much as we did. As we continued sorting through photographs, I found myself memorizing Emma's expressions. The sound of her voice, the easy comfort of her presence beside me. Because I had a terrible feeling that these might be among our last moments of simple, uncomplicated sisterhood. Tomorrow, I would have to decide whether to honor grandmother's deathbed confession or to bury her secrets alongside her. I would have to choose between protecting Emma's innocence and giving her the truth about who she really was. And I had absolutely no idea how to make that choice without risking everything I held most dear. I barely slept that night, lying in my childhood bedroom at grandmother's house while Emma dozed peacefully in the room next door. Every creak of the old Victorian seemed to whisper accusations. Coward, liar, keeper of secrets that weren't mine to keep. By dawn, I had made my decision. I needed to talk to Sarah before doing anything else. Emma was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, humming softly while she made coffee in grandmother's ancient percolator. She looked so content, so beautifully unaware that her world was balanced on the edge of a knife. "Sleep well?" she asked, offering me a steaming mug. "Like a rock?" I lied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Listen, I have some errands to run in town today. Estate lawyer stuff, boring paperwork." Emma nodded, settling into the breakfast nook where we'd eaten countless meals as children. "I'll keep sorting through things here. Found a whole trunk of Dad's old military stuff in the basement. Might take me all day to go through it. Perfect. That would give me the time I needed." I waited until Emma was thoroughly absorbed in her project before slipping away. Sarah's address was in my phone from years of Christmas cards and birthday invitations, but I had never visited her home. As I drove through the familiar streets of our small town, I tried to prepare myself for a conversation that would either provide clarity or complicate everything beyond repair. Sarah lived in a modest ranch house on the outskirts of town, her small garden meticulously maintained despite what I now knew must be her ongoing battle with cancer. The woman who answered the door was barely recognizable as the vibrant Aunt Sarah of my memories. She had lost significant weight, her once thick auburn hair now thin and covered by a soft cotton scarf. But her green eyes, Emma's eyes, still, held that warm intelligence I remembered from childhood visits. When she saw me standing on her doorstep, those eyes filled with a complex mixture of surprise, fear, and something that might have been relief. "Claire," she said softly, "I heard about your grandmother. I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you. May I come in? I think we need to talk." Sarah's face went pale beneath her scarf, but she stepped aside wordlessly. Her living room was cozy and filled with artwork, paintings, sculptures, handmade ceramics. It struck me that Emma had always been drawn to art, always creating something with her hands. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. "You found them," Sarah said, settling carefully into an armchair that had clearly been positioned for maximum comfort. "The documents. She told me she was saving everything for you." I sat across from her, studying this woman who had been hiding in plain sight my entire life. "She left me a letter, explained everything." "Sarah, why didn't you ever tell us?" Sarah's hands twisted in her lap, and I noticed how thin they had become. how prominent the veins appeared beneath translucent skin. What was I supposed to say? "Hello, Emma. Surprise. I'm actually your mother, not your loving aunt who's been part of your life since birth?" "But you are her mother." "No." Sarah's voice was firm despite its weakness. "Margaret was her mother. Margaret raised her, loved her, sang her to sleep, kissed her scraped knees, helped her with homework. I was just the woman who gave birth to her and then got to love her from a distance." I leaned forward, trying to understand. "But it must have been agony, watching someone else raise your daughter." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at her garden. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 26 years of carefully guarded emotions. "At first, yes. It was torture. I was 19, Claire. 19 and terrified and completely alone. My parents had disowned me when they found out I was pregnant. The father was a college boy who disappeared the moment I told him. I had no money, no support, no future I could see that included keeping a baby." She paused, reaching for a glass of water with trembling hands. "When your parents approached me through the church, it seemed like a miracle. They were established, financially secure, desperate for children. They promised Emma would have everything I couldn't give her: stability, education, opportunities, a father who would love her unconditionally. But the open adoption arrangement? That was Margaret's idea, not mine." Sarah smiled sadly. "She was remarkable, your mother. She understood that I needed to know Emma was okay, that completely cutting me out would have destroyed me. So we created this elaborate fiction where I could be part of Emma's life without threatening the family structure they were building." I thought about my parents, dead now for 5 years in a car accident that had left Emma and me orphans at 21 and 19 respectively. They had seemed so solid, so traditional in their values. The idea that they had orchestrated such an unconventional arrangement was startling. "It worked," I said. "Emma adores you, always has. And I adore her." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Every birthday party I attended, every school play I watched from the audience, every Christmas morning I shared with your family. Those were gifts I never expected to receive. I got to watch my daughter grow up, even if I couldn't claim credit for raising her. But now you're dying." The words hung in the air between us, brutal in their simplicity. Sarah didn't flinch. Stage 4. Ovarian cancer. Diagnosed 8 months ago. The doctors are optimistic about treatment extending my life, but we're talking months, not years. My chest tightened with unexpected grief. Sarah had been a constant in our lives, the eccentric aunt who remembered every detail about us, who showed up with perfect gifts and endless patience. The thought of losing her felt like losing family, which I realized she actually was. "Does Emma know about the cancer?" "No. And before you ask, I haven't told her the truth about our relationship either. That's why I need to talk to you." Sarah struggled to her feet, walking to a bookshelf where dozens of photo albums were meticulously arranged. She pulled one out and returned to her chair, opening it to reveal page after page of photographs I had never seen before. Emma at 6 months old, sleeping in Sarah's arms. Emma taking her first steps while Sarah knelt nearby with outstretched hands. Emma at 3, covered in finger paint, grinning at the camera while Sarah helped her create masterpieces on construction paper. "I documented everything," Sarah said softly. "Every moment I was allowed to share with her, every milestone I was permitted to witness. I have 26 years of photographs that tell a completely different story than the one Emma knows." Stared at the images, seeing the love radiating from every frame. Sarah's face in these photos was transformed, glowing with maternal pride and tenderness. These weren't the casual snapshots of a family friend. They were the treasured memories of a mother stealing precious moments with her child. "She has a right to know," I said quietly. "Does she?" Sarah's voice was sharp with pain. What if knowing destroys the beautiful relationship she had with Margaret's memory? What if it makes her feel like her entire childhood was a lie? What if she can't forgive me for giving her away in the first place? These were the same fears that had kept me awake all night, the same arguments I had been wrestling with since discovering the truth. But seeing Sarah's obvious anguish, understanding the sacrifice she had made, and the love that had motivated it, I felt my perspective shifting. What if she wants to know where she comes from? What if she's grateful to finally understand why she's always felt connected to you? What if having this knowledge helps her process her grief about mom and dad, helps her understand that she was wanted by not just 2 parents, but 4? Sarah closed the photo album, her hands shaking slightly. And what if it ruins everything? What if she can't handle the deception? What if she decides she can't trust anyone anymore, including you, since you're the one who'll have to tell her? That last fear cut deep. Emma and I had built our relationship on absolute honesty and trust. If she discovered I had known about her parentage and kept it secret, would she be able to forgive me? Would our sisterhood survive the revelation that I had briefly been the keeper of her most fundamental truth? "There's something else," Sarah said, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. "Something your grandmother probably didn't know, because I never told her." I looked up, my stomach dropping. "What?" Sarah walked to an antique secretary desk in the corner of the room, retrieving a manila folder thick with documents. "Emma isn't just adopted, Claire. She's also the heir to a considerable inheritance." My confusion must have shown on my face, because Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger as she explained. "My grandfather was Edmund Harrison. He owned several textile mills in the region back in the 1940s and 50s. When he died, he left everything in trust for his descendants. The money has been sitting in investment accounts for decades, growing steadily. I never touched it because I had signed away my parental rights, and I wasn't sure Emma would legally qualify as a beneficiary." She handed me the folder, which contained bank statements, legal documents, and correspondence with attorneys spanning several months. But recently, with my diagnosis, I hired a lawyer to look into it. Turns out that Emma's biological connection to the Harrison family makes her eligible for the inheritance, regardless of her adoption status. We're talking about nearly $2 million, Claire. I stared at the papers in shock. $2 million. Emma, who had been struggling to establish her art career, working part-time jobs to pay rent on a tiny apartment, was unknowingly wealthy. Why haven't you told her? Because I couldn't figure out how to explain the inheritance without explaining everything else. How do I say, "Hey, Emma, by the way, you're entitled to your great-great-grandfather's fortune because I'm actually your biological mother and you're a Harrison by blood"? The complexity of the situation was staggering. It wasn't just about family, relationships anymore. There were legal and financial implications that added layers of urgency to an already impossible decision. "The lawyers are pressuring me to resolve this soon," Sarah continued. "Apparently, there are tax implications and estate planning considerations that become more complicated the longer we wait. If I die without clarifying Emma's status, it could tie up the inheritance in probate for years." I set the folder on the coffee table, my mind reeling. "So you're saying that Emma needs to know not just for emotional reasons, but for practical ones as well?" "Exactly. And Claire, there's a deadline. The trust has specific provisions about claiming inheritance. If Emma doesn't file the necessary paperwork within 90 days of my death, she loses access to the money forever." 90 days. Suddenly, the timeline for this decision had compressed dramatically. It wasn't just about if and when to tell Emma the truth. It was about making sure she had enough time to process the information and take the legal steps necessary to claim what was rightfully hers. "You could tell her about the inheritance without revealing that you're her mother," I suggested, grasping for compromise solutions. "Just say you discovered she's related to the Harrison family through genealogy research or something." Sarah shook her head. The lawyers need documentation of the biological connection, birth certificates, DNA tests, medical records. There's no way to claim the inheritance without revealing the adoption. We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on both of us. Outside, I could hear children playing in a nearby yard, their laughter a bitter contrast to the gravity of our conversation. "There's one more thing," Sarah said finally. "I've been in touch with a specialist in New York. Experimental treatment that might give me more time. But it's expensive, and my insurance won't cover it. The inheritance could pay for the treatment, but only if Emma claims it and chooses to help me, which she can't do if she doesn't know who I really am." The ethical complexity of the situation had just multiplied exponentially. Sarah wasn't just asking for the right to acknowledge her daughter before dying. She was asking for the chance to live longer, to fight for more time with the child she had loved from a distance for 26 years. "You're asking me to tell Emma that her entire life has been a lie so that you can ask her to fund your medical treatment with money she doesn't know she has," I said, trying to process the full scope of what was being asked. "I'm asking you to give Emma the choice," Sarah corrected gently. "The choice to know where she comes from, to understand her full heritage, to claim what legally belongs to her, and to decide for herself what she wants to do with that knowledge and those resources." When she put it that way, the moral calculus shifted slightly. This wasn't about protecting Emma from painful truth. It was about giving her agency over her own life, her own decisions, her own relationships. But it was also about asking her to make those decisions while processing grief, learning about lifelong deception, and facing the potential loss of the only mother figure she had left. "How do I even begin that conversation?" I asked, the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders like a physical burden. Sarah reached across the space between our chairs and took my hand. Her skin was cold and papery, but her grip was steady. "The same way your grandmother began it with you. With truth, with love, and with the acknowledgement that some secrets are too important to die with us." As I drove back to grandmother's house, I found myself taking the long way, needing time to process everything Sarah had revealed. The adoption, the inheritance, the medical treatments, the compressed timeline. Each element added another layer of complexity to an already impossible situation. Emma was in the backyard when I arrived, sitting on the old swing set Dad had, built for us when we were children. She was reading through what appeared to be military commendations, carefully organizing Dad's medals and service records into chronological order. "Find anything interesting?" I asked, settling onto the swing, beside her. "Did you know Dad was awarded a Purple Heart?" Emma held up the medal, her voice filled with wonder. "There's a whole citation here about how he saved 3 members of his unit during an ambush in Iraq. He never told us about any of this." I studied the document she showed me, thinking about family secrets and the reasons people choose to hide, painful or complicated truths. Dad had never talked about his military service beyond mentioning that he had served overseas before meeting Mom. Now I understood why. Some experiences are too difficult to share, even with the people you love most. "Maybe he didn't want us to worry about what he'd been through," I suggested. "Maybe," Emma agreed, carefully returning the medal to its case. "But don't you think we had a right to know? This is part of who he was, part of our family history. It feels wrong that he carried it all alone." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Without knowing it, Emma had just articulated the exact argument for telling her about Sarah, about her true parentage, about the inheritance waiting for her. How could I keep her family history from her when she had just expressed the belief that hiding such things was wrong? I began, then stopped. The words caught in my throat, too big and too dangerous to release without careful consideration. "What is it?" she asked, turning to study my face with that intuitive sensitivity that had always made her such a good sister. I looked into her green eyes, Sarah's eyes, and felt the weight of 26 years of beautiful deception. Tomorrow, I would have to shatter her understanding of who she was. But tonight, I wanted to preserve the innocence in her expression just a little longer. "I just think you're right," I said finally. "People we love shouldn't have to carry important secrets alone." Emma smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "That's what we have each other for, right? No secrets between us." I squeezed back, my heart breaking with the knowledge that within 24 hours, I would be testing that promise in ways neither of us could imagine. The morning came too soon. I stood in the kitchen making coffee with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, listening to Emma's shower running upstairs. Today was the day. I couldn't keep stalling, couldn't keep making excuses about estate lawyers and paperwork. Sarah's 90-day clock was already ticking, and every moment I delayed was a moment stolen from Emma's right to make her own choices. The DNA test kit sat on the kitchen counter where I had placed it at dawn, ordered overnight from a lab Sarah had recommended. 2 small tubes and some paperwork that would provide scientific confirmation of what we already knew to be true. Physical evidence that couldn't be dismissed as family legend or wishful thinking. Emma bounded into the kitchen wearing one of Dad's old navy t-shirts, her damp hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked so young in that moment, so trusting and uncomplicated. My heart ached knowing that in the next hour, I would be responsible for changing her life forever. "Sleep better last night?" she asked, pouring herself coffee and adding the ridiculous amount of sugar she'd preferred since childhood. "Not really," I admitted. "Emma, we need to talk about something important." She must have heard something in my voice because she set down her mug and turned to face me fully, her expression shifting from casual morning chatter to focused concern. "What's wrong? Is it something about the estate? Did the lawyers find problems with grandmother's will?" I had rehearsed this conversation in my mind a dozen times, but now that the moment was here, all my carefully planned words abandoned me. How do you begin to dismantle someone's entire understanding of their identity? "It's not about the will," I said, gesturing toward the kitchen table. "Please sit down." Emma's face grew more worried as she settled into her chair, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug like it could anchor her to normalcy. "Claire, you're scaring me. Just tell me what's going on." I reached for the blue box I had retrieved from grandmother's closet, setting it on the table between us. Emma's eyes fixed on her name written in grandmother's handwriting across the lid. "Grandmother left this for you," I began, which was technically true even if it hadn't been intended that way. "There are some things about our family that she felt you needed to know." Emma reached for the box with steady hands. But I could see the slight tremor in her fingers as she lifted the lid. The photograph was on top, just as I had arranged it. The image of our mothers holding us as infants, the impossible timeline that made us the same age instead of 2 years apart. "I don't understand," Emma said slowly, studying the photograph. "This woman with you, she looks like you," I finished gently. "Her name is Sarah Harrison. You know her as Aunt Sarah." Emma's face went white, but she didn't look away from the photograph. I watched her mind working, processing details she had never questioned before. The resemblance, the special connection, the way Sarah had always seemed to understand her on a level that went beyond casual family friendship. "That's impossible," Emma whispered, but her voice carried no conviction. "She's not. Mom and Dad never said." I placed the birth certificates on the table, pointing to the dates. "You weren't born in 1995, Em. You were born in 1997, 2 months after me." To Sarah. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Emma stared at the documents, her breathing shallow and quick. I could see her mentally reviewing every interaction with Sarah, every birthday party and museum visit, every moment of connection. That had felt so natural, but now carried entirely different meaning. "She's my mother," Emma said finally, her voice barely audible. "Sarah is my biological mother." Yes. And Mom and Dad adopted you when you were 4 months old. They loved you completely, Em. Nothing about that changes. Emma's hands were shaking now, coffee spilling over the rim of her mug as she set it down too hard. They lied to me. For 26 years, they all lied to me. The pain in her voice cut through me like a blade. This was what I had been afraid of. The betrayal. The sense that her entire life had been built on deception. They protected you, I said carefully. They gave you stability and love and a family. The lie was told out of love, not manipulation. A lie is still a lie, Claire. Emma's voice was rising, tears beginning to track down her cheeks. I had a right to know where I came from. I had a right to know who I really am. I reached across the table, but Emma pulled her hands back, wrapping her arms around herself defensively. The rejection stung, but I pushed through it. You're still you, Em. You're still my sister. Still the person who painted murals on her bedroom walls and collected stray cats and made me laugh when I was crying over stupid boys. Your DNA doesn't change any of that, doesn't it? Emma's green eyes, Sarah's eyes, were bright with unshed tears. How can I trust anything I remember now? Was every family dinner a performance? Every Christmas morning a charade? Did you know? Did you always know? I found out yesterday, I said quickly. I swear to you, Em, I had no idea until I found Grandmother's letter. I've been wrestling with whether to tell you ever since. Wrestling with it? Emma's voice turned sharp. You mean you considered keeping this from me too? The accusation hit hard because it was fair. I had considered it, had spent sleepless hours weighing the value of truth against the comfort of ignorance. I was trying to protect you, I said weakly. From what? From knowing where I come from? From understanding why I've always felt different. Why I never quite fit the family template the way you did. Emma stood abruptly, pacing to the kitchen window. God, Claire, how many conversations have we had about feeling like an outsider? How many times have I wondered why I was so different from Mom and Dad? She was right, and the memory of those conversations made my chest tight with guilt. Emma had always been the artist in a family of practical people, the dreamer among realists, the one who saw the world through a different lens. I had attributed it to her unique personality, but now I understood it was something deeper, the call of different blood, different heritage, different dreams. There's more, I said reluctantly, knowing I had to tell her everything now. Sarah is sick, Em. She has cancer. Emma whirled around, her face stricken. What? How sick? Stage 4. She's been fighting it for 8 months. The news hit Emma like a physical blow. She sank back into her chair, her head in her hands. She's dying, Emma said, the words muffled by her palms. My biological mother is dying, and I'm just finding out she exists. She exists, I corrected gently. She's been part of your life, the whole time. Every birthday, every school play, every family gathering. She was there, Em. She never left. Emma looked up, her makeup smeared with tears. But she couldn't tell me. She had to watch me grow up and pretend she was just a family friend. The arrangement worked for everyone, I said. Mom and Dad got to raise you without feeling threatened. Sarah got to be part of your life without disrupting the family structure. And you got to have 4 parents who loved you instead of 2. But it was all fake, Emma protested. Every hug, every conversation, every moment of connection, it was all built on a lie. The love wasn't fake, I insisted. Sarah loved you from the moment you were born. Mom and Dad loved you from the moment they held you. The circumstances were complicated, but the love was real. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, trying to compose herself. Does she want to see me, now that I know? I thought about Sarah's fear, her terror that Emma would reject her or be unable to forgive the deception. She's scared. She's been carrying this secret for 26 years, Em. She's afraid you'll hate her for giving you up, for lying to you, for waiting until she's dying to tell you the truth. I don't hate her, Emma said quietly. I'm angry, I'm confused, I'm hurt. But I don't hate her. Relief flooded through me. This was the Emma I knew, quick to anger but quicker to forgiveness, capable of seeing past her own pain to understand other people's motivations. There's one more thing, I said, reaching for the folder Sarah had given me. About the inheritance. Emma looked up sharply. What inheritance? I explained about Edmund Harrison, about the textile mills and the trust fund that had been waiting for nearly 80 years. I watched Emma's eyes widen as I detailed the amount, the legal requirements, the timeline for claiming it. $2 million, Emma repeated, her voice hollow. I'm supposedly entitled to $2 million from a great-great-grandfather I never knew existed. The lawyers need documentation, I explained. Birth certificates, DNA evidence, medical records. There's no way to claim the inheritance without proving the biological connection to Sarah. Emma stared at the paperwork, her expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that might have been anger. So Sarah needs me to know who she is, so I can claim money that could pay for her medical treatment, Emma said slowly. This isn't just about family bonds and deathbed confessions. There's a financial motive. I had been dreading this reaction, this cynical interpretation of Sarah's timing. It's not like that, Em. The inheritance is yours regardless of whether you help with her medical bills. She's not asking for your money. She's asking for the right to acknowledge you as her daughter. But the experimental treatment would give her more time to know you as her daughter instead of as her niece. More time to share stories and family history and all the things she's been forced to keep to herself for 26 years. Emma was quiet for a long time, processing everything I had told her. Outside, I could hear the normal sounds of a Tuesday. Morning, cars starting, dogs barking, children waiting for school buses. Life going on while our family redefined itself around kitchen table confessions. I need to see her, Emma said finally. I need to hear this from her. My heart jumped. Are you sure? We could wait a few days. Let you process everything first. No. Emma's voice was firm. If she's dying, if there are deadlines and legal requirements, then we don't have time to waste. I need to see her today. I reached for my phone, but Emma stopped me. Not yet. First, I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets. No more protecting me from difficult truths. No more deciding what I can and can't handle. Emma's eyes were serious, her voice steady despite the tears still drying on her cheeks. If we're going to get through this as sisters, I need to know that you trust me with the truth, even when it's ugly. I nodded, understanding the weight of what she was asking. I promise. And I need you to come with me, to see Sarah. I don't think I can face this alone. Of course, I said immediately. We'll face it together. Emma managed a watery smile. Just like always. But even as I agreed, I wondered if anything would ever be just like always, again. The foundation of our family had shifted, revealing fault lines that had been hidden for decades. Emma was about to meet her biological mother not as Aunt Sarah, beloved family friend, but as the woman who had given her life and then loved her from the shadows for 26 years. As Emma went upstairs to change clothes and compose herself, I called Sarah to let her know we were coming. Her voice shook when I told her Emma wanted to see her. How did she take it? Sarah asked. Better than I expected, I admitted. She's hurt and angry, but she's not running away. She wants answers. And the inheritance. She understands the situation. Sarah, she needs to hear from you that this isn't about money. She needs to know that you would have told her even if there were no inheritance involved. Of course I would have, Sarah said immediately. The inheritance just gave me a deadline, a reason to stop waiting for the perfect moment that was never going to come. When Emma came back downstairs, she looked composed but fragile, like someone preparing for surgery. She had changed into a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, and her hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked young and vulnerable, and brave all at once. "Ready?" I asked. Emma picked up the DNA test kit from the counter, turning it over in her hands. "This will prove it, right? That she's really my mother?" "If you want to take it," I said. "The legal documentation might be enough for the lawyers, but if you need scientific confirmation for your own peace of mind—" "I do," Emma said firmly. "I need to know for certain. I need something that can't be questioned or explained away or dismissed as wishful thinking." As we drove toward Sarah's house, Emma was mostly quiet, staring out the window at the familiar streets of our hometown. But as we turned onto Sarah's road, she suddenly spoke. "What if I can't forgive her?" she asked, her voice small. "What if knowing the truth makes it impossible for me to love her the way I used to?" I thought about that question, about the fragility of relationships and the way secrets could either strengthen or destroy the bonds between people. "Then you'll work through it," I said finally. "Love isn't just about the easy moments, Em. It's about choosing to keep loving someone even when they've disappointed you or hurt you or made choices you don't understand." Emma nodded, but I could see the fear in her profile as we pulled into Sarah's driveway. In the next hour, she would come face to face with the woman who had shaped her life from the margins, who had loved her with the fierce protection of a mother, but the careful distance of a friend. And for the first time in 26 years, they would have to figure out how to be mother and daughter instead of aunt and niece. As we walked to the front door, I realized that this moment would change all of us. Emma would gain a mother, but lose her innocent trust in family narratives. Sarah would gain the right to claim her daughter, but lose the comfortable fiction that had protected them both. And I would gain a deeper understanding of my family, but lose the simple certainty of being Emma's only sister. The door opened before we could knock, and Sarah stood there in a soft yellow cardigan, her thin face bright with nervous hope and fear. "Hello, Emma," she said softly. "I'm so glad you came." Emma stood frozen for a moment, studying Sarah's face with new eyes, seeing the resemblances that had been hiding in plain sight her entire life. Then, without warning, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around the woman who had been forced to love her from a distance for 26 years. "Hello, Mom," Emma whispered, and I watched Sarah's face crumble with joy and relief, and 26 years of pent-up maternal love. The real conversation was just beginning. Sarah's living room had never felt smaller. The three of us sat in an awkward triangle, 26 years of unspoken truth hanging in the air like humidity. Emma perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture rigid with nervous energy, while Sarah remained in her armchair, hands folded carefully, in her lap as if sudden movements might shatter the fragile moment. The word "Mom" still echoed in the room, though Emma hadn't repeated it since our arrival. I could see her processing, cataloging every detail of Sarah's appearance through this new lens of understanding. The way Sarah's eyes crinkled when she smiled. The gesture of tucking hair behind her ear that Emma did unconsciously. The artistic eye that had guided Sarah's home decoration, reflected now in Emma's own aesthetic sensibilities. "I brought something," Emma said finally, pulling the DNA test kit from her purse. "I need to be certain. I need proof that can't be questioned." Sarah's face tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, I understand completely." Emma opened the kit with methodical precision, reading the instructions twice before breaking the seal on the first collection tube. "Will you do yours first?" Sarah nodded, accepting the swab with steady hands despite the slight tremor that had become more pronounced over the past few months. She followed the protocol exactly, sealing her sample and labeling it with information that would soon confirm what they both already knew in their hearts. Emma's hands shook slightly as she took her own sample, but her voice remained steady. "How long for results?" 72 hours for the standard report, I said, having researched it obsessively the night before. But they offer expedited processing for an additional fee. "Do it," Emma said immediately. "I'll pay whatever it costs." Sarah started to protest, but Emma cut her off with a look that was pure determination. "I need to know," Emma said simply. "And then we need to talk. Really talk. About everything." While Emma prepared the samples for shipping, Sarah and I watched, her with different expressions of anxiety. Sarah's face showed the fear of a woman about to have her deepest secret scientifically validated, while mine probably reflected the worry of someone watching her family reconstruct itself in real time. "Tell me about my birth," Emma said once the package was sealed and ready for courier pickup. "Not the version from the adoption papers. The real story." Sarah took a shuddering breath. "You were born at 3:47 in the morning on August 15th. I was in labor for 18 hours. You came out screaming, and you had this incredible grip. Your tiny fingers wrapped around mine and wouldn't let go." Emma's composure cracked slightly. "Was anyone with you?" "Your grandmother." "Not Margaret. My mother. She flew in from Denver, despite having disowned me 6 months earlier." She took one look at you and started crying. Sarah's voice grew soft with memory. She said you were the most beautiful baby she'd ever seen, and that she was sorry for being so cruel about my pregnancy. "What happened to her? My other grandmother?" "She died when you were 3. Heart attack. She never got to know you properly, but she left a letter for you. I've been saving it." Emma pressed her lips together, fighting tears. "A letter? What? Does it say?" Sarah rose slowly and walked to her bookshelf, retrieving a small wooden box I had never noticed before. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was an envelope addressed in spidery handwriting. "For my granddaughter Emma." She wrote it the day before she died, Sarah explained. "She knew she'd waited too long to be part of your life, but she wanted you to know that she loved you from the moment you were born." Emma accepted the letter with reverence, but didn't open it immediately. "Why did she change her mind? About disowning you?" "Because holding you changed everything for her. She realized that her pride and disappointment in me were less important than loving her granddaughter." Sarah returned to her chair, her movements careful and deliberate. "She spent those 3 years sending gifts through me, asking for pictures, begging me to find a way for her to be part of your life without disrupting the adoption." "But you never told my parents about her?" Margaret and Robert were already struggling with the open adoption arrangement. Adding another layer of complexity seemed cruel to everyone involved. Sarah's voice carried years of carefully calculated decisions. "Your grandmother understood. She said she'd rather love you from a distance than risk losing you entirely." Emma clutched the letter to her chest. "How many people have been loving me from a distance my entire life?" "More than you know," Sarah admitted. "My younger brother Daniel, your uncle, lives in Portland. He's an artist too. Paints landscapes. He has a studio full of paintings he's done from photographs of you over the years." "Uncle Daniel?" Emma repeated, testing the words. "I have an uncle who's an artist. And 2 cousins. Daniel's daughters. They're 23 and 25. They know about you, Emma. They've grown up seeing pictures and hearing stories. They've always wanted to meet their cousin." I watched Emma's face cycle through emotions as her family tree expanded in real time. The loneliness she had sometimes expressed, the feeling of being different from the rest of us, suddenly had context. She wasn't different. She was just missing half her family. "Why now?" Emma asked. "Why tell me now instead of 5 years ago or 10 years ago or when I turned 18? Sarah's hands twisted in her lap. "Because I was a coward. Because every year that passed made the secret harder to reveal. Because I was terrified you'd hate me for giving you up, or that you'd be angry about the deception, or that learning the truth would somehow damage the beautiful life Margaret and Robert had built for you. And the cancer changed that? The cancer gave me a deadline I couldn't ignore anymore." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "I realized that my fear of hurting you was less important than your right to know who you are and where you come from, Emma." was quiet for several minutes, staring at the unopened letter in her hands. Finally, she looked up at Sarah with an expression I had never seen before, ancient pain mixed with newfound understanding. "I always wondered why I felt so connected to you," Emma said slowly. "Why I felt more comfortable talking to you about art and dreams than I did with Mom and Dad. Why you seemed to understand parts of me that they couldn't quite grasp. You are so much like me at your age," Sarah said, tears beginning to track down her cheeks. "Stubborn and passionate and determined to see beauty in everything. Watching you grow up has been like seeing myself get a second chance at youth. But you missed so much," Emma's voice broke. "First steps as my mother, first words directed at you, first day of school, graduation, heartbreaks, achievements. You were there for all of it, but you couldn't claim credit for any of it." "I didn't need credit," Sarah said firmly. "I needed to know you were loved and safe and becoming the incredible woman you are. Margaret and Robert gave you things I never could have provided. Stability, financial security, a father who adored you, educational opportunities, a sister who worships you." Emma glanced at me, and for a moment, I saw fear flicker across her features. "Claire is still my sister, right? This doesn't change that?" "Nothing changes that," I said immediately. "Biology doesn't define family, Em. Love does. And I've loved you as my sister since the day Mom and Dad brought you home. But now I have a biological mother and a biological uncle and biological cousins." Emma's voice trailed off as she processed the implications. "Now you have a bigger family," Sarah corrected gently. "Not a replacement family, an expanded one." Emma opened the letter from her other grandmother, reading it silently while Sarah and I waited. Her tears fell steadily as she worked through the handwritten pages, and by the time she finished, her composure was completely shattered. "She says she wished she could have been my grandmother openly," Emma managed through her sobs. "She says she watched me from across the church every Sunday, that she knew my favorite color was purple because she saw me wearing it so often, that she wanted to teach me to knit and bake cookies and all the grandmother things she never got to do." Sarah moved to the sofa, wrapping her arms around Emma for the second time that day. This time, Emma melted into the embrace completely. 26 years of unconscious longing finally finding its proper home. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered into Emma's hair. "I'm sorry for all the moments we missed, all the conversations we couldn't have, all the times I wanted to hold you as your mother instead of your aunt." They cried together while I sat frozen in my own chair, watching my sister find a piece of herself she had never known was missing. The moment was beautiful and heartbreaking in equal measure, and I felt both included and separate from their connection. When they finally separated, Emma wiped her eyes and looked directly at Sarah. "Tell me about the inheritance, all of it. Don't try to protect me from the complicated parts." Sarah spent the next hour explaining the Harrison family history, the textile mills, the trust that had been growing for decades while waiting for a rightful heir. She showed Emma photographs of Edmund Harrison, pointing out the resemblance between Emma's artistic eye and her great-great-grandfather's innovative approach to fabric design. He was known for incorporating unusual patterns and colors into traditional weaving techniques, Sarah explained. His mills were the first in the region to experiment with synthetic dyes. He was an artist as much as a businessman. Emma studied the old photographs with fascination. "I can see it in his eyes. That look of someone who sees possibilities where others see problems." "Exactly like you," Sarah said proudly. "You have his creative vision." When they reached the part about the experimental medical treatment, Emma's expression grew serious. "How much time would the treatment give you?" "The doctors estimate 18 to 24 months, Sarah replied honestly. "Maybe more if I respond well, maybe less if I don't." "And without it?" 6 to 8 months. Emma processed this information with the same methodical approach she had shown all day. "What would you do with the extra time?" "Get to know my daughter properly," Sarah said immediately. Meet my brother and his family as Emma's mother, instead of as the mysterious woman who sends Christmas cards. Maybe travel, if I'm strong enough. Show you where our family came from. The inheritance is legally mine, regardless of what I decide about your treatment, Emma clarified. Completely. The lawyers have made that very clear. You could claim the money and never speak to me again, and it would still be yours by right. Emma nodded, then surprised both of us by standing up abruptly. I need some air. I need to think. She walked to Sarah's back door, stepping onto a small patio that overlooked the carefully maintained garden. Through the window, I could see her pacing among the flowers, her phone pressed to her ear. After a few minutes, she came back inside with a different energy, more decisive, more focused. I just called the lab, she announced. Paid for the fastest processing they offer. We'll have results tomorrow evening. Emma, Sarah began, I'm not making any decisions about treatment or inheritance until I have scientific confirmation, Emma interrupted. But I want you to know that I don't hate you. I'm not angry about being given up for adoption. Margaret and Robert were wonderful parents, and I can't imagine having been raised any other way. Relief flooded Sarah's features. Thank you. That means more to me than you can possibly know. Sarah absorbed the criticism without defensiveness. You have every right to be angry. The timing is terrible, but I couldn't find the courage any sooner. Tomorrow, after we get the DNA results, I want to meet Uncle Daniel, Emma said. And my cousins. I want to see those paintings he's done of me. I want to understand this whole other half of my family that's been invisible my entire life. I'll call him tonight, Sarah promised. He can drive down from Portland. He's been waiting 26 years for this conversation. Emma turned to me, her expression softer but still intense. And I need you to promise me something, Claire. No more protecting me from difficult information. No more deciding what I can or can't handle. If there are other family secrets, other complications, other people I should know about, tell me now. I searched my memory for anything else grandmother might have hidden, any other relatives or circumstances that could affect Emma's newfound understanding of her identity. As far as I know, this is everything. But if I discover anything else, you'll be the first to know. Good. Emma sat back down, but her posture remained alert. Now tell me about the legal requirements for claiming the inheritance. I want to understand exactly what needs to happen and when. We spent another hour reviewing documentation, discussing lawyers and timelines, and the various steps Emma would need to take once the DNA results confirmed her Harrison lineage. By the time we left Sarah's house, Emma had a complete understanding of her options and a clear plan for moving forward. As we drove home, Emma was unusually quiet, staring out the passenger window at the familiar landscape of our hometown. Finally, she spoke without looking at me. Do you think Mom and Dad would be upset about me finding out about Sarah? I considered the question carefully. I think they would want you to have all the information you need to make informed decisions about your life. They loved you enough to arrange an open adoption in the first place. They trusted Sarah to be part of your life because they knew she loved you too. But they never intended for me to know the truth. Maybe not, I admitted. But they also probably never imagined a scenario like this one. Sarah dying, an inheritance involved, legal deadlines that couldn't be ignored. I think they would adapt their thinking to match the circumstances. Emma nodded, but I could see she was still processing. Everything feels different now. Not bad different, just different. Like I'm seeing my whole life through a new lens. That makes sense. You've learned you have different parents than you thought. Different family, history, different inheritance rights. Of course everything feels different. I keep thinking about all those times Sarah visited, all those museum trips and art classes and birthday parties. How did she stand it? Loving me but not being able to claim me? The same way any parent loves their child, I said, by putting your happiness ahead of her own needs. Emma was quiet again until we pulled into grandmother's driveway. As we sat in the car, she turned to face me directly. Tomorrow changes everything, doesn't it? Once we have the DNA results, there's no going back to pretending this never happened. No, I agreed. Tomorrow we find out officially what we already know. And then you decide what you want to do with that information. Emma nodded, then surprised me by reaching across the seat to take my hand. Thank you, she said simply, for telling me the truth even when you were scared, for coming with me today, for still being my sister even though we're not related by blood. I squeezed her hand, my heart full of love and pride for this incredible woman who had handled the most shocking day of her life with such grace and maturity. Always, I promised. No matter what else changes, that never will. As we walked into the house together, I realized that Emma was right. Tomorrow would change everything. But some changes, I was beginning to understand, were long overdue. The DNA results arrived at 4:47 p.m. the following day. Emma read them aloud in Sarah's living room, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. Probability of maternity, 99.97%. She looked up from the paper. It's official. You're my mother. Sarah closed her eyes. 26 years of careful secrecy finally ended. How do you feel? Relieved, Emma said, surprising us both. I didn't realize how much I needed the scientific confirmation until I had it. Uncle Daniel had arrived that morning from Portland, a tall man in his 50s with Emma's artistic hands and Sarah's gentle demeanor. He sat quietly in the corner, tears streaming down his weathered face as he watched his niece accept the truth about her heritage. Emma, he said softly, I have something for you. He opened a worn leather portfolio, revealing dozens of paintings. Landscapes, portraits, abstract works that captured light and movement with breathtaking skill. But these weren't random artistic studies. Every painting incorporated elements that connected to Emma. Her favorite shade of purple in a sunset, her distinctive laugh interpreted in swirls of golden paint, her childhood fascination with butterflies rendered in delicate watercolor wings. 26 years of painting my niece, Daniel said, his voice rough with emotion. 26 years of loving someone I could only know through photographs and stories. Emma moved through the paintings slowly, studying each one with the eye of a fellow artist. These are extraordinary. You captured things about me I didn't even know myself. Art sees truth even when we can't speak it directly, Daniel replied. Every brushstroke was a letter I couldn't send. Every color choice was a conversation I couldn't have. The meeting with Daniel's daughters, Emma's cousins, happened over video call later that afternoon. Maya and Sophie, both young artists living in Seattle, wept openly as they finally spoke to the cousin they had grown up knowing about, but never meeting. They shared stories of family traditions Emma had missed, holidays celebrated with her empty chair, art projects inspired by the mysterious sister they someday hoped to know. We always wondered if you inherited the family artistic gene, Maya said through the screen. Mom sends us pictures of your paintings from social media. You definitely got it. As the sun set, Emma sat with the inheritance paperwork spread across Sarah's dining table. The legal documents were complex, but the choice was simple. She signed each page deliberately, claiming her birthright as the last living heir of Edmund. Harrison, what will you do with the money? I asked. Emma looked at Sarah, who was dozing fitfully in her armchair, the day's emotions having drained her limited energy reserves. The experimental treatment first. We're going to buy her more time. And after that? Art therapy programs for kids in hospitals. Mom always said art saved her life when she was young and scared. Maybe we can save other kids the same way. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emma had learned she was wealthy in the same week she learned her identity, and her first instinct was to use that wealth to help the woman who had sacrificed everything, to give her a better life. Sarah's treatment began 3 weeks later at a specialized clinic in New York. The experimental therapy was grueling. Daily infusions that left her weak and nauseous, radiation sessions that burned her skin, medications that clouded her thinking. But Emma was there for every appointment, holding her mother's hand through procedures, reading aloud during long treatment days, advocating fiercely with doctors and nurses. I watched their relationship evolve from the artificial distance of aunt and niece to the intimate closeness of mother and daughter. They discovered shared mannerisms, similar tastes in music, identical stubborn streaks that made them both terrible patients when they caught colds. Sarah taught Emma family recipes that had been passed down through Harrison women for generations. Emma taught Sarah modern painting techniques that brought new life to her artistic expression. The treatments worked. Not completely, not miraculously, but enough. Sarah's cancer went into remission after 6 months of aggressive therapy. The doctors cautiously optimistic about her prognosis, speaking of years instead of months, of hope instead of end-stage planning. Emma used part of the inheritance to buy a small house in Portland, close enough to Uncle Daniel for daily visits, but far enough from our hometown to start fresh. She opened an art studio that doubled as a therapy space, working with children facing trauma and illness. Sarah, regaining strength, became her assistant, bringing decades of artistic knowledge to their joint mission. I visited often, driving up from our hometown on weekends to paint alongside my sister and her mother. The dynamic took time to adjust. I was no longer Emma's only family, no longer her primary confidant and support system, but our bond remained strong, perhaps stronger for having survived the revelation that we weren't blood relatives. "You ever regret telling me?" Emma asked one evening as we cleaned brushes in her studio. Sarah had gone home early, still building back her stamina. "Never," I replied honestly. "You deserve the truth. You deserve to know your mother, to understand your heritage, to claim your inheritance. What about you? Do you feel like you lost a sister?" "I gained a sister," I said finally. "I gained Sarah as a second mother figure, Uncle Daniel as family, Maya and Sophie as cousins. Our family got bigger, not smaller." Emma smiled, the expression lighting up her paint-splattered face. Grandmother would be proud of how this turned out. She would, I agreed, thinking of the woman whose deathbed confession had set all these changes in motion. She'd probably say she planned it this way all along. 2 years after the DNA test, Sarah's cancer returned. This time, the experimental treatments weren't effective. She faced her diagnosis with the same quiet strength she had shown throughout Emma's childhood, making practical arrangements while cherishing every remaining moment with the daughter she had finally been allowed to claim. Emma held her mother's hand as Sarah died peacefully in the Portland house, surrounded by paintings created by 3 generations of Harrison artists. Sarah's last words were "thank you," gratitude for the 28 years she had been given to love Emma, even if most of that love had been disguised as something else. At Sarah's funeral, our expanded family gathered openly for the first time. Uncle Daniel delivered a eulogy about a sister who had sacrificed everything for love. Maya and Sophie read poems about the aunt who had taught them to see beauty in difficult circumstances. Emma spoke about the mother who had loved her from the shadows until she was brave enough to step into the light. I spoke last, about secrets and truth, about family bonds that transcend biology, about the courage required to rebuild your understanding of love when everything you thought you knew turns out to be both completely wrong and absolutely right. The inheritance, what remained after medical expenses and charitable donations, went into a trust fund that would support art therapy programs indefinitely. Emma kept Sarah's house as a retreat for young artists, a place where creativity could flourish without judgment or expectation. On the 3rd anniversary of grandmother's death, Emma and I returned to her old Victorian house, now owned by a young family with children who ran through the rooms that had once held our childhood memories. We sat on the front porch where we had played as girls, watching the new owner's kids discover the same hiding spots and secret corners we had loved. "Do you think she knew?" Emma asked. "When she told you that Sarah wasn't my real sister, do you think she knew how much it would change everything?" I thought about grandmother's final words, her insistence that some secrets were too important to die with. I think she knew exactly what she was doing. She was giving you the gift of truth, even though she knew it would be complicated and painful and messy. "The best gifts usually are," Emma said, leaning against my shoulder in the easy companionship we had maintained despite all the changes. As the sun set, painting the old house in shades of gold and amber, I reflected on how much our family had changed and how much it had stayed the same. Emma was still my sister, still the first person I called with news, still the most important relationship in my life. But now she was also Sarah's daughter, Uncle Daniel's niece, Maya and Sophie's cousin, and the inheritor of artistic traditions that stretched back generations. The secret that had seemed so devastating when grandmother first whispered it had become the foundation for something beautiful, a family rebuilt on truth instead of convenient fiction, love that was acknowledged instead of hidden, relationships that were chosen rather than assumed. Emma stood up, stretching in the fading light. "Ready to go home?" I looked at her. Sister, daughter, artist, heir, survivor of secrets and keeper of truths, and smiled. "Always," I said, and meant it. Some families are born, some are made. The best ones, like ours, are rebuilt from the wreckage of beautiful lies into something stronger, more honest, and infinitely more precious than what came before. The truth, I learned, doesn't always set you free immediately. Sometimes it tears apart everything you thought you knew about yourself and the people you love. But given time and courage, and the willingness to rebuild, it creates something better than the fiction it replaces. As we drove away from grandmother's house for the last time, Emma's hand found mine across the center console. Sister to sister, heart to heart, truth to truth, exactly as we had always been, and exactly as we would always be. The secret was finally free, and so were we. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.